All right, thanks everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started and begin the webinar now. Today's webinar is titled Mental Health for Black MSM and brought to you by Proactive Community Services in collaboration with AIDS Foundation Chicago and Illinois Department of Health. Proactive Community Services, or PCS, was founded in February 2005 by an African-American woman who saw a need to close the widening social and health disparities that severely affected African Americans. PCS is a minority-serving human service organization located in the South suburban community of Flossmoor and provides comprehensive services to 28 South and 5 Southwest suburban communities. The agency's service portfolio includes health and wellness and workforce development and supportive services. During this webinar, PCS invites faith leaders, community advocates, and other individuals interested in reducing the rate of HIV, STI, and other communicable diseases in Black and Brown communities to join this conversation facilitated by Al Forbes, MBA of Forbes Consulting, Minister Oliver W. Patton Jr., MSP of Love Abide and Be Church, with guest speaker Dr. Anthony Johnson and our regular speaker, Pastor Charles Strait. We encourage you to please join us next week for our next webinar on Thursday, July 14th at 6 p.m. Central. You can also view recordings of past sessions on the PCS website at pcsil.org by navigating to past webinars in the Events and Webinars section of the homepage. Please continue this and other conversations on ending the epidemic on Facebook. As a reminder, your cameras and microphones are set to off, so please write your questions and comments in the chat box, which we will be monitoring. If you would like to come off mute to ask a question, please raise your hand from your Zoom panel and I'll give you the floor. Also, PCS is looking to get more speakers for future webinars. Please send information for potential speakers to gtzwebinars@pcsil.org. As an announcement, the Resilience Project is conducting a paid study to learn about the experiences that have affected your HIV care. They're looking for Black men who are 16 to 35 in age, living in Chicago, and having sex with other men. Eligible participants can earn a $50 gift card for completing an online survey. If you're interested, please call 773-647-0359 or visit a website that I'll post in the chat. Finally, as a disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed in our discussion are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Proactive Community Services. All right, with all that said, I think we're ready to get started. Let's throw it over to our panelists to provide a brief introduction to themselves. I'll let you go first.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Andrew. We would be remiss to start this session without paying condolences and our respects to those individuals who lost their lives this past weekend in Chicago. The epidemic of gun violence is out of control, and we just pray for those who have lost loved ones. Tonight is a special night for me. I have the honor of introducing to some my son, my friend, Dr. Anthony Johnson, who just earned his PhD last month. And so this is the first time I think he's doing a public speaking engagement, having become Dr. Anthony Johnson. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say tonight. But I'm gonna bounce this over to Minister Patton and then to Reverend Strait to introduce themselves. And then we'll go right to Dr. Johnson to hear his message about mental health and Black MSM. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, all. It is a blessing to be back on again on another Thursday night. Just being able to learn more and just learn more to be able to be more effective to go out and try to change everybody and everything to get down to zero. I'm Minister Oliver Patton from Love Abide Missionary Baptist Church, and I have a master's in psychology. And it's going to be great to hear from Dr. Johnson this evening because I can learn a little bit more.
Good evening, everybody. This is Charles Strait. I have the wonderful privilege of being the pastor of the Faith United Methodist Church in Dalton, Illinois. And it is great to be a part of this conversation. And I, too, am looking forward to our conversation this evening because I believe that mental health is something that we don't talk nearly enough about in the Black community in general. And specifically amongst same-gender loving men in our community. We don't give enough attention to the things that make us healthy and whole in our mental existence. So I am excited about this conversation.
And Dr. Johnson.
All right. I'm excited to be here this evening. Thank you all for having me. I am going to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see what's going on?
Yeah, we've got it.
All right, great. Let's close caption off. And let's see here. Okay. So before we get started on the conversation of mental health, this presentation is straight from my dissertation, and it is about the health goal process. So how do Black men who have sex with men achieve their health goals? So within my dissertation, I went through a journey of speaking with men about their health goal process. And so it was a qualitative study, and it happened pretty much during the course of the pandemic. But hopefully this will lead us into deeper conversation around the mental health status of Black men who have sex with men. So the purpose of my research was to learn more about the process of health goal achievement among Black men who have sex with men using a rigorous qualitative methodology. So how do they define health and how do they achieve their health goals? This study was set out to actually document their processes and their experiences as it pertains to health goal achievement. So what motivates them to reach their health goals? What challenges them on their health goal journey? What inspires them when times get hard and when things don't work out as expected? So this was an exploratory study, and I used a holistic perspective, right, to actually dig deep into some of their strengths and motivators and barriers towards health goal achievement. So the research questions were, what are the major health goals and concerns of Black men who have sex with men? What are the perceptions of healthy functioning among Black men who have sex with men? What are factors that support Black MSM in reaching their health goals? What are their motivators? And what barriers do they face and actually combat on their health goal journey? So as we all know, or maybe not know, but I'm sure you've heard this before, especially in these sessions, that Black men who have sex with men have a lifetime risk of HIV that is 1 in 2. So that's 50%. Black men who have sex with men are disproportionately impacted by HIV, while also being at a heightened risk for social and health conditions such as homelessness, incarceration, violence, substance use, and anxiety. Given that Black men who have sex with men do not engage in higher sexual risk behaviors than their counterparts, it is extremely important that research focuses on components of health and mental health regarding this group of men that goes beyond HIV infection. So before we go on this journey and talk about how Black men who have sex with men actually achieve their health goals, we cannot ignore the impact of HIV on this community. So some of the social structural barriers impacting the lives of Black men who have sex with men include racism, homophobia, toxic masculinity, poverty, poor access to resources, and again, incarceration. Um, all have impacted the lives and social advancement of Black men who have sex with men. Um, and so, which also limits their access to HIV prevention and care technologies. So resilience, it is widely noted that Black men who have sex with men are resilient, especially when it comes to facing challenges and dealing with trauma as it relates to HIV. What this study sought to do was go beyond the HIV aspect. But with that being said, we know, and it's been documented, that Black men who have sex with men are resilient. And given their many struggles and barriers at the point of intersectionality, they have been able to adapt to their intersecting struggles and barriers in many ways. Further research can be done to learn more about how Black men who have sex with men develop resilience to reach their health goals. But yet, there are very few resilience-based interventions that have been designed to uplift and advance, and socially as well, the lives of Black men who have sex with men. Speaking of this, I want to talk a little bit about intersectionality here. Black MSM hold multiple identities, that is being Black while also being an MSM. And intersectionality is, some call it a theory, some don't. But for the purposes of this, I would say that it's a theory that helps to explain how Black men who have sex with men experience inequity and disparities at the point of being a Black male as well as an MSM, which makes their life experiences unique and challenging given the oppressive society that we live in. And just given that Black men who have sex with men hold the identity of being Black and MSM, life can be extremely challenging for them because they are not only combating typical stereotypes of being a Black man, but they also have to face challenges and adversities pertaining to their sexual orientation, rather they are out or not. So in the study, I used a couple of things here as it pertains to my methodology. I used a meta theory or a paradigm called social constructionism, which allowed me to dig in deep to learn more about their lives and how they navigate lives as it pertains to their health and well-being. So this paradigm allowed me to not put these men in a box and not to, and then also recognizing that this is not a monolithic group of men. They're very diverse. I used grounded theory, which means I started off with a blank canvas. Although I used several theories such as intersectionality and resilience, a little bit of syndemic theory to help explain the purpose of this study and why this study was so important. But grounded theory, again, just allowed me to let the men guide and lead this study. So all of the data comes straight from the men and their voices. I used a bottom-up and individual, but also kind of group-centered approach towards towards the focus group. So while I used a semi-structured interview guide, I just kind of went with the flow and let the men go where they needed to go as they went into detail about their health and their health goal process and well-being. I use a per person sampling strategy, so that, by word of mouth. I work with several organizations as well, but word of mouth was the main way that men learned about the study, and flyers, Facebook and Instagram and all of that. And shout out to the Gentlemen's Network as well. They were very supportive and involved with this study as well. It's just a flyer here, that I use. But again, most of the men in the study learned about the study by word of mouth. So I had 27 men in this study, and I did 7 focus groups. I used the constant comparison method, which means I went line by line and really just took the data from their voices, and that emerged into the themes and sub-themes. I also did member checking, which means I called them up and I was like, hey, does this sound right to you? I'm hearing this, but what about you? I did a whole lot of note taking, and of course I used theory to help kind of, it really helped me to explain what the men were saying in a scientific way, so to speak. So some of the findings that we found, this is really going to get into to the mental health piece, but these men defined what health meant to them. And so the major theme here was health defining factors. And it kind of was broken down into kind of like these sub themes or points here, which were self-capability, self-transparency, self-awareness, honesty, medical adherence, mental health, and consciousness. So one man kind of broke it down like, I don't want to have to worry about my health. I want to be able to trust my doctor. I want to be able to have conversations and do my own research. So, it was more of like this cautiousness, but also being capable. But the men also, of course, highlighted mental health is a major point or a major factor in their in how they actually defined health. Health-related goals. So they had a plethora of goals, but these were the main goals. We're navigating substance use, good, regular, daily habits, food, sexual health, longevity, to lose weight, physical appearance. And again, here we go. You'll see it kind of throughout this presentation is mental health. And one man kind of stated that your mental health is what is going to keep you. Trust me. And he kind of went into detail that, this is one area of health that SGL men, or same gender loving men, do not focus on. So motivation to achieve health goals is another theme here. And a whole lot of men talked about hope. So in terms of hope for the future, they talked about having strong social networks that included family and friends, self-interest, and having a sense of achievement, being proud of oneself as they go throughout their health goal journey and actually reaching their goals. So at the end of their goal, they would be proud, and that would increase their hope. But along that journey, they did mention social networks as a part of their mental health and well-being as they kind of go through their health goal journey. So strategies to stay on track with their health. So as stated here, as they're kind of going through their health goal journey, a whole lot of men pointed to turning to family and friends, having a plan and structure, surrounding themselves with the right people, and kind of having steps for success, ordering steps, and leveraging technology. This, to me, is a whole lot about their mental health, especially when it comes to their friends and their families and being around the right people. And also having a plan and structure in place so you don't kind of lose sight of your goal. And so that was kind of what they pointed to in terms of strategies that they use to help them stay on track and stay on course, so they don't lose sight of their health goals and that they're actually increase their likelihood of reaching their health goal. Overcoming intersectional barriers. Barriers were a big piece. Again, you'll see mental health was a barrier that was mentioned several times throughout this study. So mental health barriers, but also racism, self-accountability, lack of infrastructure. They talked a little bit about condom use and cost in food and diet, but the major barriers were mental health barriers and self-accountability. And just wanting to be seen and be recognized and be loved, but knowing that a whole lot of that love kind of starts from within. So I also want to point out too, that when they talked about their infrastructure, they talked about kind of having a safe space and place to talk and to express themselves with men that are like them in a healthy and positive way. That was another big one for health barriers. Overcoming their barriers. So this is key here because on the health goal journey, a whole lot of men talked about that you're not always going to win, and that's okay. You must embrace failure as a part of the process, and that's okay, but you have to pick yourself up and keep on going. Also focusing on mental health as self-care, and also pointing to their resilience, how strong that they are, and how they're able to power through their struggles. But most importantly, cutting themselves some slack, as you kind of see one man stated here. You got to cut yourself some slack, not be so hard on yourself and be gracious with yourself. And so as long as you're making progress, that's better than no progress. So let me go there. And so some of the next steps, so kind of like to wrap this all up, this calls attention to the importance of mental health and social capital for Black men who have sex with men. I would say that it also kind of calls to social work and public health interventions that support the mental health strengths and motivators for health goal achievement among Black men who have sex with men. We must focus also on increasing access to mental health services for Black men who have sex with men. And this includes supporting them towards positively powering through their barriers that get in the way of their health goal achievement. And then for me as a researcher, more research needs to be done that incorporates their voices and their experiences and their lives as we work towards the development of new interventions, that must be informed by the voices of the men that actually seek to uplift and empower these men. So just to wrap it all up, the health goal achievement process. If you start off on the right here, you'll kind of see health goal barriers. As stated before, we know that the men have a high degree of resilience to help them power through. But what's really key here is that a whole lot of men that were in this study were actually able to recognize what their barriers were. So that kind of helped them stay on track towards reaching their health goals, which really played into some of those factors of motivation and psychological empowerment towards their health goals that led them to health goal success. So I want to thank you all. This is my beautiful mother. She's not here, but she's always here in spirit. Thank you all for listening to me today, and all the people who work with me, on my dissertation. Alfred is not listed here, but he should be. And I want to give a shout out, Alfred, who's been there with me since day one. And so thank you all for listening, and I want to shut up now.
Thanks so much for your presentation, Dr. Johnson. We had a question too from the chat from Al. He had asked, can you elaborate on the role of self-accountability?
Hello?
Hey, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yep. I can hear you now.
Did you hear my question from the chat?
Oh, no. I can hear you.
Oh, no problem at all. Al had written in the chat, can you elaborate on the role of self-accountability?
Yeah, so basically, as it pertains to this study, they explained it in a way of, if I set a goal for myself, and if I'm not reaching that goal, what else is in the way? And am I holding myself accountable, not in a way that's negative, but in a way of, if I said that I'm going to do this, I really need to do this. This could lead to something more major. And so, I think that played into factors of motivation for these men, into factors of once they actually want to get to that sense of achievement. But if they don't hold themselves accountable for what they say that they're going to do, when they say that they're going to do it, they won't get to that point. Did I explain that, Alfred, or you want to go a little bit deeper?
No, you did, and I what we definitely want to do on this session is just figure out what you learned that we can incorporate in our programs around HIV interventions with Black MSM, and how we can make a programmatic changes that would be reflective of what the men say they need. So really leaning into that information to figure out how do we incorporate it.
Absolutely. I would say that plays into, once these men are able to actually recognize their barriers, but also identify their health goal, then that's the point in which they can really start to hold themselves accountable for actually reaching a health goal, and also with the ability to knock out some of those barriers that get in their way, or they know that's going to get in their way, or that's got in their way in the past. And they talked about the process in which you're doing that, and tracking that, whether it is working with their family and friends, whether that is using their phone and writing notes, having a diary, those kinds of things.
So I guess another question would be, in your estimation, how typical were these Black MSM, same gender loving men, of the men that are encountered in interventions? Were these higher performing individuals, or were they people that we might be encountering, and that this knowledge, this information really is relevant to how we design programming going forward?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. This was a diverse group of men, from 18 to 60. It was 27 men, which is a large sample size for a qualitative study, but still good size. And mixed income status. I would say that some of them may be representative that we see. Find a way to word this, because it was such a diverse group of men that I can't really put them in a box. Mixed HIV status, I want to say almost 50-50 split as it pertains to HIV. And mostly on the south, if not all, on the south and or south side of Chicago. As a matter of fact, all of them were, which I think tells us something as well. But in terms of knowing if they're going to, seek services, at a particular institution, that's a hard one to answer. A whole lot of men seem to really be not as trustworthy of institutions, of healthcare institutions that actually deliver a whole lot of these interventions.
Thank you. One more question. How important did you find it for the men themselves to identify the health issue that they were addressing? So we oftentimes go in and we tell men, you're at risk for HIV, but did your study shining light about the relevance of them identifying that risk for themselves?
Yes, really surprisingly, a couple of men at the end of the focus group came up to me and said, why didn't we talk about HIV? HIV, I on purpose did not make this a HIV study. I wanted to go a little bit deeper and see what was going on. Now it did come up. They talk about condom use and safer sex and things of that sort, but it really came out of it. It was not prescribed, so to speak, as much as you tell me what your health is to you. And so it really did kind of factor in and go back to their mental health and their social well-being, their physical well-being. It was more holistic in nature. And I found that profound, even for myself. In some focus groups, they didn't talk about HIV at all, or very little, which tells us, that a whole lot of men, they know about HIV, they know what it is, they know their risk, but it's the things that lead up to that risk or lead up to HIV acquisition. It's not necessarily the HIV that's the problem for these men, at least in this group.
Thank you.
But I feel like I only answered part of your question. Did I answer it fully?
Yeah, I think you gave us that note that we can't just tell people what their problem is. They have to arrive at that being a health problem for them, and then I guess that resilience would then kick in, because they see it as their problem, and their resilience then kicks in, versus us telling them that you are at risk and this is your problem, and they're like, okay. So yes, you did. And I do definitely want to open this up to Minister Patton and Reverend Strait, and to remind the listening audience, please throw your questions in the chat room. If you want Andrew to take you off mute, please raise your hand. He'll take you off mute. Reverend Strait or Minister Patton?
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, I loved your presentation, and I like how you did your focus group and your study on it, where you didn't keep them in a box. My question to you is, in your focus group, I know you said you had some resilience, but what other type of information that you got from the MSM that was those that were sitting in there with the diverse group on why they did not seek mental health counseling before and they decided to just open up in the focus group? I know you used a technique that the one of the techniques that was taught is I'm gonna have an open discussion. I'm not gonna put you in the box. I'm not gonna force you to. Like you said, I'm gonna let you arrive at your health where you can explain to me. What challenges did you have with those that have never had any contact with any type of counselor or any type of psychological done on them at all, of the issues that they have? What was the challenges that you had with them?
You know, I would say that I can't say that I had any challenges as much as you hit some very good points here. I mean, I was able to develop trust with these men right at the beginning of the focus group, to let them know that this is not the type of study that is here to do research on you, but to do research with you, so we can actually work together to learn more about your health goal process and what's actually important to you, and learn about your strengths. And so this study was actually set up to empower the men in the focus groups from the very beginning, which I think helped to like break the ice. I also think, this is something that, I'm also a Black man who has sex with men in that category as well. And I also think that played a role as well. When you see another Black person in that quote leadership role, I think that's helpful. In a whole lot of healthcare services, there aren't practitioners or researchers that are Black. There's often folks who are not Black or brown that are doing research on Black people. And again, oftentimes it's on Black people. It's not necessarily with. So there was a sense of safety and a sense of community in the space. I made sure we had home cooked meals. I made sure, and I think that Alfred was at some of the sessions. I made sure that it was a peaceful space for them to feel safe, for them to, feel like they could truly express themselves in a way that was, in a way that they could be open and not be insecure about some of their real health concerns. Again, mental health is a real health concern, just as much as racism is. And I was able to provide a space. I really didn't do much, but provide the space and ask the questions. The way in which they were having the conversation amongst each other, they fed off of each other. So one man would say, hey, I'm going through violence, or I went through violence with my partner, and it really changed the way that I handle myself, And then somebody else would kind of jump in and talk about their experiences. While this study is not a study on violence, what I really learned is that these men truly, I won't say that they didn't feel like they had access to mental health services as much as the mental health services that were, or that are available to them, they're not interested in because of where they come from. So, there needs to be more mental health services available on the South Side and readily available on the South and West Side. Some of the things that I noticed. Did I answer your question though?
Yes, you answered it perfectly, especially when you said we're not doing research on you, we're doing research with you. And sometimes with counseling and certain sessions that drives people away, because sometimes they don't want to go into an office or sit in the chair where the psychologist or the counselor is constantly talking and they never get a word in because now they're feeding to you what happened in your life and what your mental health issues are without even letting you talk. I always say that sometimes it's just good to observe as a psychologist or clinical psychologist. Just sit back and listen and observe. That person is going to tell a story if you let them talk. Like you said in your focus group, they feed it off of each other. Well, they just opened up because you set the tone and the pace at the beginning as an open space, as a conversation. I'm not putting you in the box. Everything is open. That trusting of you coming in like that, that gave them that open feeling. I can express everything now because we're out in open. I'm not pressured that somebody's trying to tell me what I've done in my life and they have not walked a day in my shoes.
Exactly. You know, and I think that that's so key because I think that a whole lot of Black men and, you know, and subpopulations of Black men don't feel like their practitioners are actually listening to them. I wanted, I personally, because I'm a Black man, I did not want these men to feel like they were a subject or another number or a patient. That's not how you get to what you need to get to. And really let them drive the research. It's not the researcher or the practitioner that's driving the research. It's actually the folks who are that are giving up their time and taking out their time to actually be a part of the research. And so we must work together. And I think that's what we miss a whole lot in practice, whether it's healthcare practice or social work or mental health. And so thank you for that question. That really challenged me. Yeah.
I also wanted to say thank you for your research and your being here tonight. And I know that you did not give us, and thank you for that too, by the way, a lot of statistics. But the ultimate failing of good mental health is suicide, right? And so, in our country, we have high rates of suicide in our community. In fact, the Office of Minority Health said that in 2019, for young men between the ages of 15 and 24, suicide was the second leading cause of death, and that we are have much higher rates of suicide in our community than our white counterparts. And so I wanted to kind of ask you if you'd go back to this idea of intersectionality again. If that is true generally in the Black community, that African-American men are more apt to commit suicide and to have decreased mental health services and so on and so on. What does that look like if you are not only Black, but you are Black and gay, and you are dealing with prejudice and stigma and discrimination at higher rates than your straight counterparts in our community? Did you have any conversation and any analysis of what that looks like for our same gender loving men who might be on the verge of suicide, or who might have talked about suicidal ideations, or in general, what does that look like in terms of their general mental health well-being?
Some really good points here. You gave me a lot. Okay, so I think that, when we talk about intersectionality and why I think it's vital, and it was vital for this study, it's going to be vital for Black men who have sex with men who experience multiple forms of violence, whether that is police violence, intimate partner violence, gang violence, or just being a Black gay dude who's on the South Side and on a bus and gets jumped because he is gay, or he expresses that he may be gay, or he looks gay. I think just being a Black man, you're already at a higher risk of being exposed to multiple forms of violence, not by your own doing, but just being a Black man in this country. And then when you add on a layer of, being same gender loving, that just magnifies your likelihood of being exposed to multiple forms of violence, not just one form, but to multiple forms. And violence is not necessarily always, to me, where you get hit or that you get physically hurt or something like that. It can happen structurally. It can happen in the form of being stereotyped. It can happen, at the point, and for Black men who have sex with men, it may happen at the point of racism and homophobia in one. And so the way that I like to think about this is that when we talk about intersectionality as it pertains to Black men who have sex with men, we kind of have our box to the left with Black men. Then we have our box to the right, which is general gay men. And then with Black gay men or same gender loving men, in that middle part, it overlaps. A whole lot of it does. And also, given that, this study, that's why I did not want to prescribe HIV, but that is also another layer, that these men have to deal with and combat. And so, I'm not sure if I'm really able to answer your question.
Well, let me just jump back in and ask you if you saw differences. So that in those places of intersectionality, and I think that that's a really important thing for us to talk about, and I'm so glad that you did bring that up. Did you see higher rates of, let's say, depression or higher rates of suicidal ideations? Because when you talk about these places where I have to deal with not only my being Black, but also my being gay, and also my being rejected perhaps by family and by church and by community, how does that play into, and of course, this idea of getting to zero for us in our general conversations over these Thursday nights also means that we must pay attention to how our HIV is being cared for. Did you see a difference in the folk in your study as they talked about what it meant to have these places of intersectionality in their mental health? Were they more likely to have different outcomes than just say Black straight men or their white gay counterparts? Did you see any of that, or did you have any of those kinds of questions?
Yes, I could say anecdotally, just because the study really gets to mental health, which is, that's suicide as well. It's a mental health thing. What I can say is a whole lot of men in the study talked about their relationship with God a whole lot. Some men were not necessarily out in the church. And I think that, and they mentioned, racism and not having access and being challenged or being stereotyped because of their HIV status. I think that all of that does and can increase their likelihood of suicide. Because I know definitely from the study, it definitely made them anxious, made them depressed, oftentimes made them feel invisible, unworthy. So while the study cannot say that it will lead to suicide, but these are some of the upstream factors, so to speak, that play into, that can play into suicide, or just a poor mental health status.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. I'm gonna put you and stretch your resources now. I'm
Okay.
looking at your study as being a foundation for a potential grant I'm looking at writing up around getting to zero. So we've talked about the professional mental health providers, the traditional, psychiatrists, psychologists, and trained counselors. So what I'm looking at is how effective are we being if we are training peers as counselors and developing peer support groups towards building that resilience, which speaks to a holistic health of physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, which eventually does respond to the question of how to get to zero around HIV. Because I think sometimes we take it from HIV and do a top down from HIV being at the top, whereas it sounds like if we do a bottom up, we will get to that HIV, but we don't start there. We start with the person where they are, their resilience in general, and then let them apply that resilience to their HIV risk factors or potential acquisition behaviors.
Absolutely, Alpha. Oh, I'm so glad that that you get it, as I knew that you would. And I think that, with a whole lot of uh, these men that were in this focus group study, it's not about HIV. It is more about their process in terms of just having a good life, just having a general good health status, which is about their mental health. A whole lot of men that are at risk for HIV are typically dealing with some type of mental health barrier, as the man talked about in this study. And so I'm going on a tangent here, but no, you don't start with HIV when you're dealing with Black men or Black men who have sex with men. That already kind of puts a tag on them. We have to change the language. We have to change the way in which we work with Black men who have sex with men, and Black men, but Black men who have sex with men, because they're hearing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, that we don't really care about your general well-being or your mental health, but we care if you get HIV. How does that truly help them in terms of living a holistic life? Which, Alfred, I'm glad that you brought it up. That is, and although the men didn't talk about church very deeply, that's a whole nother study, but they did say things like ordering my steps. That to me, being a spiritual person, being a man of God, I kind of heard that, and I put that as one of my sub themes, because most of the men in the study had some connection with God, which plays into their motivation, which plays into their health goal achievement process. So it's not necessarily the HIV, it's more about their spiritual well-being, their social well-being, their economic well-being. um, you know, and their strengths, because these men are already strong, but there are barriers that get in the way of them reaching their health goals that they have to combat with their spirituality, with their family and friends, having someone to talk to them which they can trust. So, did I get to your point, Alfred, or did I?
Yeah, you did, and I'm just wanting to, because we're going to be using you, Dr. Johnson, because it's great that we have Black researchers and Black PhDs who can help us to frame things that are research based and science based, because a lot of the white methodologies are not meeting the needs of Black men, let alone Black gay men or Black same gender loving men or Black MSM. So as we prepare to train peer counselors and set up peer support groups, would that speak to some of the things you've spoken about in terms of resilience and building up those
Alfred?
Hey, I
Yeah.
think you broke up there.
So would peer counseling, training peer counselors and developing peer support groups, would that speak to some of the things you mentioned in terms of helping to build resilience and addressing barriers and creating a positive environment for Black MSM?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just, I mean, and I would say, I would even go more simple than that. Having a space where a group of men, that Black men and Black intersectional men can come together to talk about their health. That conversation, most of these men that were in the focus group did not want the focus group to end. I was tired though, after about, 90 minutes to 2 hours, tired. But, they wanted to continue the conversation. They did not want it to end because that opportunity doesn't happen a whole lot for Black men to come together in a group setting that is safe and that is safe and open, in which they can talk about their health. That is not just necessarily focused on their sexual health or HIV. So, I definitely think that just having support groups and peer groups, it could be as simple as that from what I saw from this study. So yeah.
We had a question from the chat for you too, Dr. Johnson. Pastor Straight wrote, how do you think MH affects staying in care or getting into care if they are HIV positive?
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And I'm sorry that MH is mental health. Sorry.
Yeah. It definitely, I think because if you're dealing with mental health barriers, and we can just go with fear, depression, anxiety, substance use, even all of these things impact how and if these men stay in care. And getting into care, I think it's a whole nother thing because of the fear factor. A whole lot, most, if not all, Black men who have sex with men, at least in my study, they're well versed about HIV. They knew their risk. I think that it's not a fact of the HIV as much as it is the stigma. The stigma and the fear and the fact, okay, I'm gonna have another thing. So now I'm gonna be Black, same gender loving or gay or not out or whatever the case is. And I'm gonna have to deal with HIV, which categorizes me. So now I'm gonna be another number. And so I think that that their mental health can and will impact, but you asked how. Y'all give me some good questions. So I say that it does, we know that, but how? I would have to dig a little bit deeper, just simply because I think that it is circumstantial. I think that there's so much stigma, particularly in the Black community, that a whole lot of men who are positive, they won't tell their family or their close friends unless they are like them, i.e. another Black man who has sex with men that also may have or be at risk for HIV. So I think that fear plays a major role. But I don't. I'm gonna have to dig deeper on how though, because there's so many different ways to go to go with this. But I can definitely answer your question, Pastor Straight, and say that yes, it does, but it is circumstantial. And that's just from my experience as like a practitioner, me kind of seeing, men in the clinics that I've worked in that even after they find out that they're positive because of the fear, them not trusting the doctors or them, being, dealing with mental health issues or barriers, they don't want to come back to the healthcare system.
As you were talking, I remembered a story from, a lifetime ago when I worked as a nurse with a patient who, so I categorize mental health is in big swaths of things that impact our everyday life, and not the least of which is self-esteem, right? And so I remember having this patient who was actually dying at St. Joseph Hospital, where I worked on the AIDS unit back a million years ago when they had an AIDS unit, and he was my patient, and we were talking about spiritual health, and he asked me if I believed in God, if I went to church, and I told him yes, and he recounted to me how he had been rejected in church because of his sexual orientation, and that he had left church, and that he was no longer involved in any spiritual care at all, because he had been told he wasn't worthy of God's love. And I remember having that conversation with him about how God loves everybody, and that everybody is worthy of God's love, and that God's invitation to everybody in the whole world was extended to be in relationship with God. And I remember him saying, does that include me? And saying to him, absolutely it does. And for him thanking me for that conversation. And I went home that evening. I was off the next day. And when I returned a day later, he had died. My feeling was that he had died in relationship with God, because I felt that he had an opportunity to truly feel that what he had been told was wrong, and that he too had an opportunity to be in relationship with God. And so this level of self-esteem that happens in our mental health existence, that could cause depression, and that causes us to be disconnected from community and from church and from family. Those kinds of things also impact our ability to seek care. And I think seeking care, you may have thought about it in terms of healthcare, but it's much bigger than that for me, right? It's care from your mother. It's care from the church. It's care from the community, because I am in need of that help. But when my mental capacity is reduced, when my thinking of myself, when my thinking of my understanding of myself is less than, I am much less likely to seek that care. Likewise, if I have issues with schizophrenia, or if I have issues with other forms of mental health disease that would require me to have medication, for instance, I'm less likely to seek that care or to be in care if I am unable to get that medication. If I have mental health challenges and I'm homeless, I am less likely to be in care and to seek that care. And so that huge swath of mental health problems that arise that cause us to be disconnected from the places where we get care is kind of what, I was thinking of, as I try and grapple with, as a pastor of a church in the South Suburb, how am I providing care for those persons who are in need of mental health services that we all need. So I see myself as a practitioner, not nearly as expert as you are, Dr. Johnson, but I see myself as having to provide each Sunday some level of mental health services to people who come through the doors of Faith Church. And I said a whole lot there, but as we continue forward and we look at ways that we can help people like you provide professional services, I can't help but think of how people like me, Minister Patton and Gloria, and the people at PCS also provide this much needed mental health service to help people stay in the care zone, maybe is a better place to put it, as opposed to just talking about being in care, where they are more likely to get to zero, where they're more likely to stay HIV negative if they are HIV negative, and to have zero what's the word I'm looking for? If they're HIV positive, so that they're no longer able to spread the disease.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just love that, that you mentioned spiritual care. In this study, although I can't directly say that, that study found this, because that would not be right, but there was definitely some undertones to like my spiritual well-being and actually, having hope for the future, and and having good people around me who actually increase my faith, increase my hope. And I'm glad that you mentioned one thing that you kind of made me think of is a whole lot of men in this group, Black men in this group, feel neglected, whether it's by their family, by their church, by white people, by the healthcare system. And the more neglect that you experience, the less hope, aspirations that you have to actually get care, or as in the story that you just said, it seemed like there was a level of, because of a high level of neglect, he had just truly lost his hope to live, his will to live. And that happens a whole lot with men who are sex with men. That's why having peers and having folks who truly care, particularly people of color who are actually doing the work, why that matters. Not because of the HIV piece as much as it is their hope and their will and their strength to motivate them to actually go get that HIV test or go seek mental health services in which they, may need. But this is a whole lot to unpack. But there definitely, the spiritual piece is something that that I think that is untapped when we talk about Black men who have sex with men and HIV, especially with the emergence of gay affirming churches. We've had several gay affirming churches in the city here. I think that faith and hope and spiritual well-being are essential to the lives of Black men who have sex with men, and just Black men in general. It's something that we need to tap into just a little bit more.
Hey, we had a couple questions come in from the chat from Gloria. She wrote that, in your research, did you find any information on whether substance use or addictions is more prevalent in MSMs than straight men?
Yeah, good question. Not particularly in this study. What I can say, when I asked most of these men, like about their health goals, what their health means to them, substance use came up a lot. It was one of those key words as I was going through the data that it came up, not necessarily addiction, but navigating their substance use. I was mindful with that in terms of language, but they were navigating their levels or of substance use. So, and this group of men talked more about alcohol use, uh, marijuana use, cigarettes. Um, those were the main things. They didn't go any deeper than that. But alcohol and smoking were one of the major factors. And most of men smoked because they were stressed, dealing with life stressors, that come with being, a Black man who was same gender. So, yeah, but I do think that there are some studies out there, Gloria, that that would actually show that maybe some studies around mental health or syndemic based studies that actually kind of go into substance use and mental health that show that that is actually not the HIV piece as much as it is. These are some of the factors that may lead to or heighten the risk or of HIV or care or medical adherence and things like that. But I could definitely pull some studies and send them and then shoot them to Alpha for you. I mean, and you don't have to read the whole study. There's, just read the abstract.
Another question she had written is, with over 50% of Black MSMs contracting HIV, what does those who contract HIV, what does their medication adherence or viral suppression stats look like? And that question's in the chat too, if you'd like to read it over.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. Medication adherence. Yeah, so I'm not sure of the exact stats. I mean, that's something that, I can pull. I'm not even sure if they have it on the CDC. Let me see here. So let me come back to that question. I'm gonna try to pull it up and see if I can pull up the exact numbers. I don't want to not give you good numbers here, good, good trusted data, so to speak. Okay. Any more questions while I'm trying to look this up here?
Nothing else, but if anybody has anything, feel free to drop in the chat or raise your hand too if you'd like to come off mute.
I think I found it. I can send it over. I can put the link about viral suppression and medication adherence. Okay, let me see here.
Now, I would not be surprised if the Black numbers are lower than the white counterparts, gay counterparts, as well as other populations.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely, is. But again, I want to dig a little bit deep. I'm going to put the link in a box here, and then you can explore that website, that link there, and it'll kind of break things down for you. This one, the one I sent was by race, but there's a couple links in there that should give us. This one I sent was by age, but the one. Oh, here, let me go here just 1 second. Here we go. And I can send this other link too. Here we go. This may be more permanent too. There we go. And that's the one on actual Black men who have sex with men? No problem, Gloria. Good questions here. Good questions. This is the first presentation that I've had since becoming a PhD, and these questions like, oh my gosh, I should be prepared for these questions in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I did want to, before we wrap up, because we have about another 14 minutes, is you did mention, Dr. Johnson, during your presentation, the challenges of Black MSM or same gender loving men, because they oftentimes are not accepted by Black community because they're gay, or accepted by white community, white gay men because they're Black. And so there is that additional trauma and drama that Black MSM go through in terms of being rejected by multiple communities and not having a safe harbor to go to, or a safe space in which they can be celebrated or just breathe. And if you just want to speak about that for a moment before we wrap up, I'm going to have you give us the last words if no more questions come through, and then turn it to our other co-hosts. But I just wanted you to speak about that, because some people may not be aware of that. And I know when we spoke with your father about a year and a half ago, and we had said to him that the LGBTQ community is not monolithic nor cohesive, and there's a lot of discrimination within the community. He was shocked. So I did want you to touch on that as to why some Black MSM may lean in towards alcohol use or drug use or other ways to self-medicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, just before I answer this question, I mean, being Black and gay can be very lonely. And I think because of that, not being, the possibility of not being accepted in so many ways by so many different kinds of people or venues. I think that first we must talk about what happens within and kind of go out. There is definitely a high degree of discrimination in the gay community. In research, even, a whole lot of research fails to state that that Black men who have sex with men are at no higher risk of HIV than their white counterparts. So we must look to other factors and determinants that play into the health and HIV status of Black men who have sex with men. It's not just about sex. I think that racism and structural racism play a major role. And some people could say, well, that, it's poverty. Well, sure, it could be, but structural racism, I think, at least in Chicago, a whole lot of structural racism, poor access, poor access to resources and to mental health services play a major role, because the folks who need them the most aren't able to get to the resources that they need. A whole lot of Black men who are gay are often not supported by their white counterparts, don't have the same resources as their counterparts, and which would live on the North Side, right? And just like this study, I'm looking at this study here that's led by Dexter. Listen here. I mean, that's why this study is so important. This is a study essentially on violence. And there would never be a study on violence for white men who have sex with men, not to this degree. I would say that, a whole lot of Black men not only have to deal with being Black, because, that's a thing, But the fact that being gay, like I said, can be challenging, it can be hard because there's still a whole lot of issues that are rooted in the gay community, Black gay community. Which why I think that we need great support systems in place, because a whole lot of Black gay men just simply get lost, or they lose hope, or they have trouble managing their lives as it pertains to God and being a Black gay man and where they stand. So they're often kind of like in limbo and feel uncomfortable with themselves and in their skin, because they may feel like they're not gonna live or no, that that they're gonna get dissed by the church. They just say, and so they can't really truly be themselves. And so when you're dealing with homophobia, racism, heterosexism, and oftentimes a whole lot of Black gay men not supporting Black gay men, dealing with all of those things at once can have detrimental effects to the mental health status of Black men who have sex with men.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to hear you. It's a pleasure to be your first presentation post your PhD. And I think we learned a lot from you tonight, and a lot of information that we can use as we look forward to writing new grants and addressing the real issues of Black MSM. Again, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Pastor Straight and then close out with Minister Patton. And if you're so inclined to close out in prayer, please do so. Again, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
It's been absolutely wonderful to have this conversation with you. And I continue to struggle with how, as a pastor, I can continue to lift up the issues of mental health services within our congregation and in our community, so that persons, particularly persons who are marginalized and people who are at the intersections of many, many other issues in our community, can be supported. And I do believe that starts with our first recognizing, the value of mental health services and the value of counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists, to normalize this idea that we have a mental health, and that mental health should be addressed like everything else. And I do appreciate talking about the barriers, particularly as they exist for Black same gender loving, Black and brown same gender loving men. And I hope that we can continue to find ways to address those issues so that we can have a healthier community. Because the bottom line is, when we all do better, we all do better. And so providing those services and that help for our brothers who are struggling within the same gender loving community only makes us a stronger and better community. And I hope you'll have a chance to come back and we can have more conversations around this.
Absolutely. I'm here.
Okay, and I thank you too, Dr. Johnson, for the presentation that you gave. Very powerful presentation that we can take inside and internalize it. And then once we internalize it, we can utilize it to externalize it to those that are out in the world and that we can help. And I'm like Pastor Straight. Sometimes we struggle with how we can maintain with mental health within the church. But I believe that if we can just continue to do the work that we're doing, and a breakthrough will come. I believe it will. I remember me doing my trial sermon, and Clay Evans told me something when he visited and he heard me. He said, the best sermon that you will ever preach will not come out of your mouth. It'll come out of your actions and what you do and how you live. And if you can live what you preach, some people will latch on to what they see you do. And sometimes when you work with people with mental health, you can somehow lead them in that direction. I believe that the church, if we can open the doors and get into the form of talking about mental health a little bit more and putting it out there, and it'll be much easier, even with training, with certain preachers and pastors. I know most pastors in certain positions have a degree in psychology, and then there's some that do not, and some that don't understand. They understand mental health, but they don't know how to utilize, don't know how to apply it. Like you said in your research, the research is not about you. The research is with you. We want you to be a part of this. So with that, I will end out and close out with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Father God, we come right now just to say thank you for this evening, Father. Father God, we come right now thanking you for all that you've done for us, Father, and all that you will do. But Father God, we ask that you keep your loving arms around us, Father, as there's so much crime and terror that's going on in this world, Father. We ask that you keep your arms around those that have lost loved ones within the last couple of days, Father, with the shooting that happened in Highland Park in Illinois. Father, let the family know that you're still there. You're still a God that sits on your throne, that you sit high and you look low, Father, that you see everything. And we ask that you continue with the families to let them know that everything will be okay, that you're always there. We ask as we leave this session this evening, Father, bless Dr. Johnson as he propels a little bit further in his career as a doctor, Father, spreading the news that need to be spread about mental health and HIV, Father. Bless all of those that are attached this evening. Bless Al, bless Pastor Straight. Bless everyone that sits on this panel, everyone that tended to the panel, that listened in, Father. Bless them accordingly, Father, for we don't know what each other is going through individually. We're not in their shoes, Father, but we know that you're a God that knows all. And we ask in your Son, Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen and Ashe.
Amen.
We look
Bless
forward
you
to seeing you
all.
next week. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and a special thanks to you, Dr. Anthony Johnson.
Thank
Peace
you.
and blessings.
Thank you all for attending. See you same time, same place next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.